Welcome to the 18% podcast. A 2018 study revealed that only 18% of people within the performing arts are working class. So this is the podcast where 100% of the people will be working class. I am Tom Mayhew, and today's guest is Ruby Martin, who is an artist, a writer and a comedian. I'm always really jealous when I talk to people who have so many talents. I feel like if I did a drawing, people would just be like, "Oh, was that by your 8-year-old son?" But Ruby's just so humble and sweet that I think you'll love her. She's recently started up a night called Comical Comedy, which she talks about later in the podcast. But the basic premise is that there's comedians who are also artists. So you can go, watch them do comedy, and then they'll have some of their art on sale as well, which I think is a really sort of interesting and unique idea. And I think it's well worth supporting, so if that sounds like something that you'd enjoy, then please look it up. But you'll hear Ruby talk about that a bit more later on in this podcast. So thank you very much, and I'll speak to you afterwards. Hello, Ruby Martin.
Hello, Thomas Mayhew.
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm quite actually warm now in this room, but I think it's just in the contrast of how cold everything else is.
This room we are in, that is a function room in a bowls club.
Yeah, it's quite cool actually. It feels like we've kind of gone back in time a bit, like to like an old, like proper working class style, like sports thing, you know. Got like a bar in the corner, or a piano,
a snooker table.
Yeah, exactly. It's all the working class requirements.
Absolutely. We did choose this location to record simply because it was the cheapest option.
Nice.
So I guess that kind of makes sense.
We stayed on brand. I like it.
Absolutely. And I've never been. Have you been bowling before?
No.
We're talking about bowls, as in bowling, where you are on grass and you have to get the ball near the jack.
I mean, I don't know what those words mean, but sure.
I only know that because my grandpa goes bowling.
I've only been the 10-pin variety and Wii bowling, really. But
I mean, Wii bowling is as much of a sport as any, I think.
It's the closest I ever came to being an Olympian, so I'll take it.
Were you good at Wii bowling?
Yeah, I was really good. Like, I was the best in my family. I was the first one who got upgraded to the pro ball.
Okay.
And then I just started going badly, so I had to stop playing until the points went down. But
I mean, of course, we've got you on this podcast as a professional Wii bowler.
Yeah, as a professional athlete.
We've not got any of them in the series so far, so it's exciting. As a working class athlete, like, do you think it was harder for you as a poor person to attain the status of professional Wii bowler, or?
I mean, yeah, slightly, you know, the physical capacity, you know, it was, some of us, we were just given a gift, you know, and sometimes that gift requires money.
When did you buy a Nintendo Wii, out of curiosity?
I didn't buy it, it was a Christmas present, because, like, Christmas was, like, the only time the family, like, you know, basically if you wanted anything expensive, it had to wait until the very end of the year. So, like, I used to get a haircut once a year, because women's hairdressers are so expensive. So I think we got it for Christmas when I was about 11, and that was almost as much as a game changer as the GameCube was, which was like a Christmas, I think, about 5-7 years beforehand. But
so what year did you get the Wii? Do you remember the year?
I don't know. This is becoming a weirdly specific.
I'm just trying to work out.
Related.
I'm just trying to work out if it was the 2006 where they were on eBay for £300, or whether it was 2009 where you could get one for about 60 quid. I'm trying to work out which.
I think it was. To be fair, it was like more. It was the more. It was when it was relatively new. So I think it was like. I don't think it was quite £300, but I think it was. I mean, yeah. God, actually, I forgot how old I was. I was trying to do the maths then. I was like, it was so many years ago. I think I was about 12. But anyway, I'm sure you didn't come. I'm not actually a Wii bowler professionally, for anyone listening at home.
I mean,
way to shatter the fourth wall, sorry.
I'll edit that bit out. I'm just going to record for an hour talking to you as if you are a professional wee bowler. You're the last remaining professional wee bowler.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the game wee bowling because it meant I could feel like I was playing tennis, despite the fact I couldn't afford a tennis racket.
Yeah, I think that was the nice thing. Cause I think I'd only go bowling every like couple of years for someone's like birthday party or something, and like so having like it was actually obviously it was expensive, but it brought a lot of people accessibility to like tennis, golf. Like no one golfs unless they're rich. Like maybe crazy golf, but even then that's another. It's all stuff that you would do maybe at a birthday party. And I mean, baseball, to be fair, I think anyone does in this country. Does the UK have a baseball team?
We have cricket. That's British baseball.
Like it's slower, more boring colour. Sorry, cricket fans out there.
Right, well there goes half of our audience.
Yeah, sorry, hot take over here. Cricket is shit. Oh.
These professional wee bowlers, they've got a real attitude.
Talk such smack in the wee bowling world.
But yes, you're right. We've not got you there because you're a professional wee bowler. That's just a lucky little extra.
That's extra string to my bow.
That's something you also do on the side.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I don't do it anymore because I don't have an actual Wii in my house. But I'm retired. I'm out of the game.
Oh, really? You reached the top, and then you thought, right, okay, I'm stepping away.
Before you go full Tiger Woods or something, like have several mistresses and a coke habit or whatever it was.
Of course, there's a lot of Wii bowling groupies around.
Yeah, still hanging on, sending the bad letters. I've had to take a Ringo policy and just I can't reply to them all anymore,
But yes, you're not actually. That's just us with a very silly opening to the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, describe myself.
It doesn't mention Wii bowling at all on your Twitter profile.
I tried keep that separate from my private Wii bowling account. Yeah.
Okay, so what? How would you advertise yourself?
I think I describe myself as a writer, artist, and comedian. None of which I get paid for. It's the fun answer, yeah.
Which of those did you do first?
It's probably somewhere between writing and drawing. I mean, because we all draw vague blobs that our parents are obliged to put on the fridge. So I did. I probably did it more because both my parents were really into art, so I drew a lot growing up. But I also loved writing, from an early age. I think I was 4. I think I was 4 when I was asked what I wanted to be, and I've always been indecisive. My answer I think was on Monday I'm going to be a doctor, and then Tuesday a ballerina, and then Thursday. But then one of them was that I wanted to be a writer, and through my teenage years I was maybe I want to be a lot of other things, but writer's kind of been the only thing that's sort of consistent. And then I've just kept drawing as a hobby, and now I do it to make strangers on Twitter laugh.
But that's kind of the thing. I most associate you with drawing because your Twitter handle is Ruby Martin Art.
Yeah, so that was actually quite a recent decision this year, because as part of my New Year's resolutions, I was I got my first office job, and you know how it is, soul crushing. But I was I found I didn't have any hobbies. I was just I was going home and then sleeping with a mix of crying occasionally, maybe using a Lush bath bomb. So I was I want to get back into my hobbies really, because I was doing comedy in university and I loved doing it, but going to gigs after a while, you're just I need to have some other outlet. I was I'm going to read more and I'm going to draw more, because I loved drawing, but I kind of had just kind of lost track of it in uni because I got so involved in societies. So I kind of made my Twitter more art orientated, because I was I'm going to make this part of my online brand. Because I saw, do you know Alex Norris?
I do not know Alex Norris.
You might know him as the Oh No comics, which you may see on Twitter, where every single one ends with somebody going, oh no. So it'd be a situation a funny situation that I can't remember any of them now, but and then it ends with him saying, "Oh no," and they were really funny and they were also really simple, and I was like, "Oh, this is great!" Like, because like art is a really expensive hobby to have because art materials are insane. So I was like, "Oh, this is, you know what? He's doing it. It's easy. I can do this. I can write like the stupid weird thoughts I have in my head, and I'm going to try and put them into like little comics and make them into jokes." So I changed my handle so people knew me, so people could find me more as like an artist as well as a comedian. Although, you know, I do also just chat a lot of shit on my Twitter.
So when did you first start trying to monetize your art? Which is a horrible word.
Oh god, yeah. No, probably way too early in my career as an artist, I imagine. It was kind of, I think I've been doing it, I think for like a month or something stupid. But I saw that people on my Twitter were saying, you know, people seemed to like the stuff I was putting out there and responding to it. And I've always loved prints and illustrations. Like William Morris is probably one of my favourite printmakers. But also it's kind of a weird niche thing, but every Halloween I've been looking for like a very specific ghost print because I was like, oh, you know, that'd be cute and spooky and no one ever makes it. So I was like, I wonder if I can make it myself. So I think it was about a couple of months, I say maybe like a month or two into like drawing and stuff. I kind of set up a Redbubble and I also like set up my PayPal and coffee and stuff basically because, as I said, like the art materials are expensive and getting like good pens. So I was like, well, you know, people on the internet occasionally donate each other money for reasons.
Yeah.
So I'll put it out there. I didn't think anyone would actually like take me up on it, but I just say like I have it there. So it's like if people like the stuff but can't really afford to pay like for actual art, which is fair enough, like they can donate money for a pen because a pen's probably on average like a couple of quid. And then, so then I started like toying around, like putting little images and then the print, so then I decided I was going to make this ghost print. Like that was a big breakthrough because that was mainly just me dicking around on Photoshop for ages until I got something that worked. And then since then, obviously I've been doing it a couple months and people have actually started commissioning me for stuff, which I still find crazy. Like I have massive imposter syndrome, like, are they sure? Are they sure they want me? But since then I've managed to get I've done business cards, comedy night posters. I've done like a YouTube display card, which I had like no idea. I was like, but give it a crack. And the most recent one was a hand painted birthday card. So that was quite fun. That was like a new challenge because I hadn't painted in so many years. And I was like, oh, you know what? Actually, I could enjoy this again.
So when you are working on something that someone's commissioned,
mm-hmm.
like how expensive is it for you to make a design? So if someone wants you to say a hand painted birthday card, how much would that cost you to actually make?
It kind of depends what they require because it's hard to kind of it's mainly hours of time. So yeah, it depends on like what size. So it would be like you might want to buy a nice piece of card. And then it's a case of more like I did with this one, it was that somebody wanted a picture of someone's cat. So a lot of the time is actually me figuring out what I'm going to do with it because most often people give me just like a vague brief. They're like, oh, you know, we want something spooky but modern day London. And you're like, oh, great, cool. Or in this case, it was just like the guy has a cat. And ideally, if it could be the cats just being shitty. So if it could have the phrase "cats do as they please," and I was like, okay, so now I've got to figure out how I'm going to make this cat look like an asshole. So it's a case of the time figuring out, and then I'll draw. So with this one, I drew like a sort of a bigger version first, because at first I was like, okay, I'll see, you know, firstly I had to check that I could actually draw cats, which I can. Good news.
Show off.
Whoa. Hate to brag or anything, but I can draw a cat. So then it was figuring out what the cat was doing. So I did like a provisional draft, firstly of the drawing. And then I was like, oh, how am I going to colour this? And I was like, well, I didn't like the idea of just block filling it out with pen because then you lose, because it's a black cat, you would completely lose the face and the body. It just kind of looked like when people kind of press their chins in against their neck to become like a human thumb. So I was like, okay, I've got to think of a way of colouring this that shows depth. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll try watercolours. So then I'll do like a watercolour test. And then after that worked out and I knew how to paint, which was good, then I did like a version which actually turned out good enough that I was like, I don't want to try this again. I'm going to send them this one. But it depends. Like if like someone, doesn't like, it's not like they don't like the drawing, but they might be like, oh, the person's head looks too big, or maybe could we try different colouring? Then it depends on like how much time it takes to then do a second draft and try and get it right. So I realise I haven't answered that question in numbers at all because my pricing is very mainly to whoever's budget it is. But I guess it depends. What's the living wage per hour, do you reckon?
Well, I think people are campaigning for it to be £10.
Yeah, okay. If we go in £10, then it's probably at least time-wise, I'm going to say about 2 hours worth of work, from like planning to painting, and that's not including any material costs. But it's mainly like just paper and pens, which I do already own. But obviously, people who are willing to commission me, you can pay me more. There's no problem there.
That's very good of you to say.
Yeah, just in case you were feeling a bit shy.
That's what I like about Ruby. Very generous. And
Yeah.
You're like, no, you can pay me more.
Maybe more. Well, yeah, I guess it's because that's postage as well. So, for example, like the person who commissioned the birthday card, he paid £25, and that works out because that's probably about right in terms of the time I put in and the materials. I try and like be reasonable with what people can afford, because like one person who I did the comedy night for, it was the night she ran herself, but she also was unemployed. So it's like, I'm not going to charge you £50. Because I've been in that position before of being like, you want nice stuff done by someone, but you also just don't have the money or, sometimes the skills. So it's like, well, what's your budget? And I try and go for the top end of that.
That's like a very socialist way of acting within capitalism.
Yeah, well, isn't all of life really, Tom?
No.
No, sadly not.
Well, no, I don't think so. I think very few people.
Well, we should strive for. That's what I mean.
No, that is exactly what we should strive for. But I don't know many organisations who would do that.
No, sadly, it's sadly very much like an individual's basis. But I think there's quite a nice thing about a lot of the artist communities. It's kind of like a lot of people in similar things, and they understand each other, but they also understand other people need money. And the sort of like Patreon and kind of Kickstarter and all these sort of crowdfunding things has kind of, it's kind of a weird internet socialism when it comes to making art. I mean, obviously it's not ideal, but it's, it does mean that communities kind of understand, well, some communities online, I should say, because if the internet's famous for anything, it isn't about everyone understanding each other. But, I think that's quite nice in that.
Good.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's my piece.
Your TED Talk. There you go. Very good.
Thanks, Chloe.
So when you were first getting into things like drawing, sort of growing up, what sort of equipment would be in your possession? What sort of things would your parents get for you?
I mean, for the most part, it just started off as like bog standard crayons, like the little kids watercolor things, just stuff that I say stuff most children have, but I don't actually know. That's quite privileged of me to say. But it's sort of like it was mainly very basic stuff at the beginning.
Most children would have crayons and stuff.
Yeah,
I think that's I think most people can say at some point they used a crayon when they were a kid. Yeah.
So it started off, I think, like mainly pencils and like watercolor paints and stuff. Like I used to make. So my big thing, like I think from the ages of like 6 to like 8, was making these cardboard houses and families out of cereal boxes. So like I would like unpack them and then I'd draw these houses and then like I'd cut them out. Well, I'd colour them in and then cut them out, just with pencils and pens. And then I've Like, I've always loved stationery. Like, it's my big nerd thing that I just love pens. So it'd always be like, at the beginning of the school year, like when you get like new pens and like pencil cases for school, and I could see if I could petition my mum to get like gel pens or something. But I used to like save up pocket money to buy like those scented felt tips, which in retrospect are such shitty pens, but you're like, they smell of stuff. I want all my drawings to smell of like fake strawberry. And then I think it wasn't until I was about like maybe 12, 13, because so both my parents were mature students at the arts university in my town. So then they had access to because Falmouth University is a really good arts university, and they had this amazing shop full of art materials. So like, we'd go down there and I would just like lovingly stroke all the sketchbooks as I walked past. So it wasn't until because at that time, they buy stuff like occasionally. I could like, do puppy eyes, I think, at my dad until he would occasionally get like a sketchbook. I went for a lot of W.H. Smith A5 sketchbooks, and then it was mainly just pencils and like pens. Sometimes from Trago Mills, which is like a very cheap shop in our town, which did used to support UKIP. No, it still supports UKIP. What am I saying? Anyway, that's an aside.
Just drop that in there.
But it's look it up. It is famous for being just really problematic as a shop. But they do like cheap everything. It's like a very, very cheap department store. So they used to do like a sort of cheap felt brush pens and stuff. So it was, I didn't really use brush pens until I was about 14, 15. And that would, again, it'd be like stuff for my birthday or Christmas or, begging my dad for weeks. And that's most of it, but because my dad and my mum are both like artists as well, like again, not paid, as a hobby. Like they would have stuff around the house as well, so occasionally like acrylic or like oil pastels, but they were normally too messy and hard for me, so I was like, pens is where it's at.
So what did your parents do as a job? How did they pay for their hobby to do art?
So my dad, since I was about, I think as long as I've lived, he's a hospital clerk. So he does the medical records for the local hospital. So he's kind of just sort of an admin, but he sorts all the files. So like he gets patients' files to doctors, and he's done that since I was about 6 or 7. I think he's done that at the same hospital. And my mum has been working in Marks and Spencer's since I was probably about 12 or 13. Before then, she worked in Tesco's.
So she upgraded then, really?
Yeah. Because she used to work in the bookshop, and then she took some time off after she gave birth to me, because there's 3 of us. Having 3 small children, like under the age of 3, she couldn't really work for a bit. And then my dad wanted to go back to university for a bit, so then she was working. So then she went back into work for Tesco's and then Marks and Spencer's. So living the glamorous life to fund being the artists.
And do you feel like the fact that they were artists but were not doing it professionally, did that sort of shape your perspective of what you could do with your creative endeavours, or do you feel like you're in a better position because of the generation we're in or the time we're in?
Yeah, it's an interesting one actually, because my dad from an early age being the staunch, very, very staunch, like I learned all my socialist views from my dad, but he always said that hobbies should be hobbies, and that that you should be doing your hobbies for happiness sake, and that any money you make should be a byproduct. It should never be the aim to make money from it. It should be that you're doing it because you want to do it and it makes you happy. And then if you make money on the side, that's great. He probably also said that maybe because he also isn't a professional artist and don't make any money from it. To be fair, because I think he does like his job, and he's always said that he likes working for the NHS because he feels like out of all the companies in the UK, it's like the most worthwhile to work for. But I've always seen art as something you do as a hobby, but most often you need something else on the side to pay the bills. And like I remember when I was 14, I was going through my phase of I want to be an actor. So I was like, Dad, I want to be an actor. And he was like, get a proper degree first. It's like, okay. But it's apparently because Tandy Newton has a degree in history, I think. That might be a fun fact, who knows. And he was saying that if you want to do it, the thing is it's a really, he's always been very honest. He said it's a really tough industry to get in, so you should always have a backup option. I think that's always been the way I've seen this sort of stuff. I've always been very practically minded, and it's why I have the job I have now, because it's like, it's definitely not what I want to do, but until people start giving me money to write or draw or make them laugh enough, I'm going to have something on the side, because pretty much most of the art industry in the UK is based in London. So the thing is, you have to pay the price of living in London, which is a very high price. But I have this job, and like, despite I've been really depressed at various points in the year, and sometimes you just want to give up and you want to move to France and go to clown school, which is a whole other issue I could get on. It's stuck. I've stuck with the job because I need this money if I want to keep. Because I feel like I'm starting to get to the point now when people are maybe taking a bit more notice of my art and my comedy, but I know like I can't give up on the day job just yet. Not until I reach that point, anyway.
I think that's interesting what you said about your dad always seeing a hobby as separate from the financial side. Because I remember when I sort of first said to my parents that I had done a stand-up comedy gig, like the first thing my dad said was, "Oh, did you get paid for it?" Like straight away, did you get paid for it? That was it. And it's almost like, I guess my parents would be different to your parents because they didn't really have creative hobbies. So for them, they're like, well, why would you do it if you don't get paid? Yeah. And I think still now, if I achieve something in comedy, they'll be like, oh, that's good. And then if I go, oh, I got paid for it, they'll be like, oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
it feels like for them, it's the most important thing is, do you get paid for it? Because they've never done hobbies for free. They've never done anything like that. So for them, they're like, well, if you're not getting paid for it, then what is it?
Yeah, no, I think to be fair, my parents would both be more proud if I got paid for stuff, I imagine. But I think they were both kind of the first of that hippie generation. Like, my dad grew up in like working class Liverpool, like, they weren't particularly rich or anything. But my dad, I think, was more of an sensitive artiste in that sense, and so he wanted to, I don't know if he wanted to get away from that, but he was kind of like, he very strongly wanted to get out of that environment, so sort of educated himself, like, because I don't want to say that because that sounds like really wanky, like, oh, he taught himself and everyone else can do that too, but he still works as an admin and still doesn't have a degree, so it's not really like pulling yourself up by any means. But he was I think he's just kind of very adamant on like trying to, I don't know, I'm gonna go say educate yourself, and I'm sorry if it offends anyone, but it's more just, I think the creative hobbies. My mum, because my mum also is dyslexic and dyspraxic, and she's never been good at academia or anything. Like, my mum's only ever really been good at artistic stuff, so I think they had to have, I think both of them had to have it as an outlet, because that's either, their way of they sort of getting out of situations or, just getting by.
I think a lot of working class people have that. It's not necessarily feeling like I want to educate myself. It's kind of just feeling like I want to drag myself out of this.
Yeah, that's what I mean, yeah.
It's like you've grown up in this little hole where money is trapping you, so there's no way out, and you can't control your destiny because you can't afford to do this and that. So it's that you thinking, I want to work hard in whatever way, whether it's an academic way or creative way. It's you thinking, I want to put the work in so that I can sleep at night.
Yeah.
So next week I don't have to worry about only having £50 in my bank account.
I feel like that's quite a similar attitude to what I've had sort of, kind of growing up. We weren't like, for the first sort of 14 years, whilst my parents were still together, we were okay. Probably not as okay as I thought we were. It wasn't until like years afterwards, and you're like, oh, it's weird that like everyone else, parents, like they all seem to own houses, and we've been renting, and we never went on holidays and stuff like that. You just kind of adds up. Like the penny only really dropped in university. I was like, oh my god, we were really poor. Sounds bad, but I think my parents like worked quite hard to like sort of shelter us from that, and like so like, but we also knew we weren't like massively rich. And the thing is, I lived in a small seaside town, which, as I lovingly tell people, is where old racists go to die. It's getting slightly better in recent years because of the student population, but it just didn't have, well, I didn't put really any funding into young people or much culture. We had like one or two art galleries, and otherwise it's just like several galleries of just like rich people who've bought a second home in Cornwall and are going to do the same boring ass landscape at the sea. Like, fuck me, Patricia, that's groundbreaking. But like, I remember like also because like I felt quite trapped because I felt like everyone in my town, well, like a lot of people in my school were quite small-minded. They didn't like anyone who seemed clever. So I was picked as the nerd, surprise. So it was sort of like I wanted money and I wanted security and I wanted to see the world and culture and be an artist rather than, work in an office job or, working in the shop and stuff, because I was like, you know what, I want to prove everyone wrong who was mean to me. So, I'm going to be fabulously successful and somehow in an artistic way. I was very naive as a teenager. But I was I saw like education was my only way out. And I was like, I have to do well at school so I can get into a good university. And then I'll get an amazing paying job in the arts because that's how it works. And I think there's that, like you say, you have like there's that when you have that drive to drag yourself out of that stuff, then you will put that work in and put yourself out there, I think.
So you said your parents are no longer together. Do you feel like it was literally a financial situation to stay together for the kids?
I mean, so I won't divulge too much of my parents' split up because it is quite messy and very personal. But I will say that they did stay together longer for a couple of years, I think mainly for the family situation, that they wanted to give us the impression of a stable home. That sounds mean. But, they wanted to sort of, I think, because once they split up, so my mum became our main custodian, although, we would see our dad like once a week, but we moved to a council estate, and that was the first time we lived in council housing because we'd privately rented before then, and that's when I started realising we might be in the shit money-wise. We moved into temporary housing we lived in one house for 2 years, and then we got kicked out of that house because the landlord wanted to move his son in, because it turns out that private landlords can rent through the council.
I didn't know that.
Well, yeah, it's weird, but to be fair, he was also a prominent councilman in our town. I don't know how it works, but basically he wanted the house back. So then we got kicked out of that, put into another temporary housing for a year, and now we're in permanent housing in a council estate where our neighbours regularly beat each other up. And we can hear it through the wall. And then you're thinking, maybe we're poor. So it's when we first moved into the council estate, and I was like, oh shit. I went from sort of like, we were sort of in the middle ground of getting EMA. Like, we got 20 quid EMA to being like full bursary, full grant, free school meals. And I was like, oh shit. Yeah.
I can relate to that, sort of not realising the full extent of the financial situation until I went to university, or at least until I was 18, and we lost the child
support.
Yeah, the child support, because you realise that, oh God, you guys actually really needed that, and I didn't even realise it was a thing really until it was taken away, and I was like, oh shit, I didn't even know. You didn't tell me that. You don't sit down with your 10-year-old and go, right, we get this money because you're a child and we're poor, because you don't do that. But it wasn't until I was 18 and I was like, oh shit, okay, wow, I have to get the bus to the job centre now, and if I've not got that money, you can't give me that money because you've not got it.
Yeah, like, I mean, there was always there was definitely like indications, mainly like the complete irregularity of my pocket money, which I think just disappeared eventually. About like,
how much did you get?
I think it was supposed to be £6 a month, and that it would be like once every couple of months at the beginning, and then like just for 2 years I was like, oh, I don't think that's happening, is it? I'm like, when the pocket money comes in, I don't know.
I remember we used to get £1 a week. That would sort of be an incentive to make you do things like, oh, if you help with the washing up, then you'll get your pocket money £1 a week. But then eventually we just got no pocket money because they couldn't afford it anymore.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, it turns out it was a thing I didn't realise until, because I went to Stagecoach very briefly, which, if you don't know, is this like Saturday drama school for rich kids. Because it was during my I want to be an actor phase. And I'd always used that as one of the reasons I was like, because I've had this like ongoing turmoil, even up until this year, like, am I working class? Am I poor? I wasn't like starving on the street, and neither of my parents were on drugs, so it can't be that bad. But I read Chav, and that was actually very enlightening. And I was like, oh no, this is just all media propaganda that's kind of made us internalise, all this class stuff.
Chav for the Owen Jones.
Owen Jones, yeah. Which is very good, but there's like so many numbers and statistics. I was like, I want to remember them all, but I can't. But I used Stagecoach because I went for one term. I always used to be like, well, we went to that, we afforded that, so that must have meant that we're not that poor. And then it turns out it was because when my granddad died, we had to sell his house, and that inheritance from that house apparently kept us afloat for a very long time, and had paid. There was like a little pocket, and I was like, oh, we had a nice few treats, and it was literally because my granddad had died. Which is so bad. Like, we don't have any property or anything, we just used that money just to keep us going for a while. And I was like, oh, that's. And then so I was like, okay, yeah, maybe we were poor.
When I was 16, I would probably, when I was sort of thinking about my identity, I would sort of feel like, oh no, I think we're lower middle class.
Yeah.
But I only would have thought that because all the media would have told me that, oh no, working class people, they're stupid, they're criminals, they're horrible, they're nasty. And I was thinking, well, my family, we're not stupid. We've worked really hard, and we don't break the law. We try and do things the right way, so we can't be working class. But it was only until I was like 18 I sort of learned more about the way society depicts people, and the fact that it tries to show working class people in that way to create a sense of other, to make people feel like, oh no, it's not as much your problem. But it took me ages to sort of be like, no way, we are working class.
Yeah, it's like embracing that. I think because it is so much like it's like you don't realise even inside you that you're thinking it's a bad thing. But like, I recommend anyone reading Chat because it does make you rethink. Because I used to say it, and it's like, I hate myself that I used to describe myself. I was like, economically we're working class, but culturally we're middle class. And I'm like, why am I such a dickhead? But it was this thing that I thought, because we liked art and we were artists, and we knew about artists and we knew about this culture stuff, and we couldn't be working class because they only like Peter Kay and just like, like not that bright and live in council estate. And then I moved to a council estate. I was like, maybe we're still lower middle class. I'm like, no. It was until university and like started receiving full grants, and then I went to UCL, which is like it's all the Oxbridge rejects, and therefore a high amount of private and grammar school students. And like, I'd say my group is they're one of the less rich end. Like, they're probably some of the poorer students at UCL. A good couple of them still went to grammar school. And then, they're talking to all this stuff. The other day in the pub, I think we ended up talking about EMA, and I said about how much my mum earned. And my friend genuinely went, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," and hugged me. And I was like, I get this is a nice sentiment that you're like, wow, that must have been hard for you, but it does feel intensely patronising for you to hug me because of how poor my mum is. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but...
Part of the reason I set up this podcast was because I wanted to showcase working class artists because they're very underrepresented.
Mm-hmm.
But also I think it's nice to have something where people can come and go, yeah, I can talk about being poor.
Yeah.
And people's immediate reaction won't be either to patronise you or to feel guilty and not know what to say.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time, like, there's some friends I have I won't bring it up with, and because I know, like, you won't get this.
Yeah.
It will go straight over your head. You'll hear the words I'm saying, but because of your background, you'll be like, oh, it's a shame, but I don't really know what to say or do. Should we talk about football again? Should we talk again? Let's talk about football again. Yeah.
Change the subject.
Did you see the football the other day with a man kicking the ball? Oh, I loved the football. I did.
Love me some football and some beer. Let's get some more beer, shall we? Do you want me to get yours? Oh yeah, no. I think like one of the most embarrassing outing moments I think of being poor was that I went to visit my friend in Northern Ireland, and we drove up to her house, and I was like, "Wow, is this all yours?" It was a bungalow. It was a bungalow in the middle of this nice countryside and a nice garden and everything, and I was like, "Wow, it's so big," and she's like, "It only has one floor, Ruby." It's like, oh. It's like, yeah, I think most of my university friends, like, they're all lovely and, you know, I get on with them on so many things, but I just, like, don't understand. And I think also quite a lot of the time I find also particularly in comedy, you get secret rich people. I mean, because you get some acts who are like, they do that whole thing of being like, oh, well, I'm straight and white and I'm quite middle class, so haha.
Wait, do you?
Well, yeah, like
I've not seen any of these acts. What? where are they? I've not seen any. What? I mean, I guess they're just not on telly or something.
Yeah.
Because...
Oh, please. You probably have to bleep that name out.
I think I'll bleep it out anyway, just because I don't like him.
Yeah, he doesn't deserve the more airtime. My boyfriend, to wind me up, just keeps playing his trailer on Netflix, and I'm like, you know my feelings on this. But like, you get a lot of them. Like, there was one I saw at Audible who was just like, oh yeah, I went to a private all-girls school and had a whole bit about that, and I'm like, I already resent you from the off. Like, that is not a good opening gambit. But then, like, you get some which are like, oh, they seem lovely, they seem normal. It's not just in comedy, to be fair. You'll be meeting someone at the bar and they'll be like, oh, you know, they seem nice, you get on, you like the same things, and then suddenly, bam, they've got a mansion in Switzerland. Like, what the fuck? I can't relate to you anymore. Or like, bam, they went for clown school for a year. Who can pay to be a clown for a year? This isn't like a gripe. Like, if you went to clown, I'm sure there's lots of really useful teaching, but like, I have like a real bee in my bonnet about alternative comedy and clown school, because all of the a lot of alternative comedians go to clown school because it's like a way of learning a lot of useful stuff, particularly about characters and everything. But also, if I told my dad I was going to go to clown school for a year, he'd laugh me out of the house. And it's like, I think there's a real problem with, like, I don't think there's very many working class comedians at all in alternative comedy, because you have to go the more bankable route. Like, you know, I think, because I loved, like, one of the first people I properly loved in stand-up was Sarah Millican, and I still do. I think she's a brilliant comedian. But I think people, like, the idea of what they have of working class comedians has to kind of fit the Sarah Millican mold of being like, oh, she's a bit crude, she has an accent, and, you know, they'll do observational material that everyone can relate, which is completely fine and good because, like, you know, it's still good comedy at the end of the day, but it's like, there's definitely a certain notion of what working class comedians can do, because observational material and stuff is the most bankable stuff, and if you want to try weird out there stuff, you have to have a parent who has a flat in London, can also pay for you to do all these weird courses and that. You can basically risk going to gigs and not doing successfully half the time. You have to have like that insurance, which being working class and struggling to get by just doesn't afford you. But anyway, that's my TED talk on alternative comedy and its problems of class. But
firstly, that was brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for that. I completely agree with like the concept of working class comedian being a genre. Because I didn't talk about being working class until I'd been performing comedy for about 3 years. And the whole reason I started talking about it was because I did a solo show in 2017, lost about $4,000 and had a breakdown in the middle of Edinburgh because I was aware of the fact that I'd just pissed money away.
Yeah.
And I'd put literally like something like stupid, like 70% of my yearly income into Edinburgh.
Yeah.
And I realised halfway through the festival that, oh no, that wasn't enough. There's people who have got a lot more money and a lot more backing, and you can't compete with them despite having all your passion and drive and working hard. That's not enough.
No.
And it was a real feeling of, this place isn't for you, this industry's not for you.
Yeah.
And I kind of just had a breakdown in the street after one show one day. I was just crying, and that was the first time. The next day was the first day I started talking about class, because I was like, well, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of feeling like comedy's not for me because I've not got money. I'm sick of feeling like I can't talk about being a working class comedian, because for ages I was like, oh no, I'm working class, but I'm not a working class comedian because I'm not like Peter Kay.
Yeah.
I'm not like Mickey Flanagan. I don't do that observational humour.
Yeah, I think like because there's a lot of privileges in comedy that we don't acknowledge, and I think there's definitely a certain thing that if you come from any marginalised group, like in order to be successful, and this isn't true across the board for anyone's like, no comedians, but I think there's a lot of things of that. If you come from a marginalised group, you have to kind of almost acknowledge that in your set and make fun of it in a self-deprecating way. And I think that's a brilliant thing about Hannah Gadsby, is hopefully it's going to change the way that, you know, it's a sort, as I say, going back to Sarah Millican, she has always made jokes about her weight and how, you know, she loves cake and she loves food and she's not one of them skinny bitches, which is one of the more problematic things she said. But, you know, she has a great heart and a brilliant comedian. But it's like, and like Comedy Roast Battle, I think, is a perfect example of this sort of, it's okay for people to make these jokes as long as they're doing it about themselves. Or in the roast scenario, because they get to punch back, because it's the other person. Like watching the Desiree Birch, Daniel Sloss one, and also the Sophie Hagen and Larry Dean, was obviously that Larry Dean and Sophie Hagen are friends, and that had slightly more of a, like, okay, this feels not quite as bad. The Desiree, like, I just found it just fucked me off so much every single time these, like, skinny white boy male comedians, like, haha, we can make a fat joke because it's a roast, haha, but also, you know, she can say that, you know, Daniel Sloss looks like a Pez dispenser and she should have fucking won that race. But personal opinion aside, and I think the working class comedian particularly is you have to kind of make yourself one of the people. You're like the lowest, you have to make yourself that lowest common denominator of observational comedy. Like, you know, most of the gripes people have about Michael McIntyre or Lee Evans or Peter Kay is like, they're just saying things that are true. You know, it's just like, oh, well, we all have a drawer. I have some stuff in it. Oh, he's a genius. But
it's a fair point.
Yeah, you know,
we do all have a drawer
with things in it.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, there's just this sort of, and it's like, it's a widespread sort of thing where, you know, if you fit under a certain bracket of stuff, yeah, then maybe you can talk about, you know, you can be avant-garde, Stuart Lee. But, you know, like, I mean, if you think about the success Stuart Lee has in comparison to Bridget Christie, but no, I'm just talking so much shit about comedians, I realise, but it just annoys me, because I think also, like, there's a thing I was thinking about the other day, which kind of unrelated to class, but I think there's like a pretty privilege as well. And I think it's that same thing that if you don't fit, because a lot of like successful female comedians are attractive and they're also incredibly talented, but then people like Sarah Millican, again, because she's a larger woman, in order to be broadly accepted by society, she has to acknowledge the fact she's not conventionally attractive and then make jokes about it.
Even then, though, she's a larger woman in a what some people would deem acceptable extent.
Yeah.
That I feel like a lot of things where there are people who do have And you go, oh, it's a woman who's not size 8, but it's literally just someone who's, oh, it's a size 10, and it's like, they're like, she's a bigger woman, and you're like, well, I mean, come on, guys, that's like in Hollywood films where there's a character who's supposed to be a woman who's unattractive, and it's like, you've eaten 2 muffins and gone, oh, look how fat I am, and it's like, mate, where's the people who eat 4 cakes? Where
are my people? Yeah, it's like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. I mean, she's, it's brilliant character, but also Rachel Bloom is fucking hot. But at the same time, they're all like, because she's bigger than everyone else, they're like, oh, we can, make all the jokes about how she's the fatty and she loves to eat muffins and stuff. And I'm like, I want to die. Like watching all this stuff. And yeah, the working class thing, it just, as someone who's kind of, I've done more alternative character stuff. And I've done even competitions, which I won't name, where I've done really well, but like, you still get told like, oh, you shouldn't just be yourself. Like, oh god, there was this one gig I did where, I did pretty well as like a character, and then the guy afterwards was like, oh, you were just really like fun as yourself, and I was talking to you. You should just be yourself. God, you don't know me. But I think there is that thing of being like, oh, you have to be like this earnest, chirpy, accented, run-of-the-mill sort of grey. That's not the sayings, but I'm diverging, but I think there is a real problem with how working class comedians, like, they have to fit into a very certain bracket in order to be acceptable and promotable, because like they've got a clear audience, and so promoters aren't willing to take that risk.
And I think it's also in the current climate, I feel like there's an idea that there's people who, if they were looking for a working class comedian, they'd want one who they can say, oh, she tells it like it is.
Yes.
And it's a bit right wing. As if there's a lot of things I read where people were like someone like Jim Davidson would say something like, oh, people are complaining because they're middle class lefties, as if you're left wing and working class, as if that's not a thing. Yeah,
it's just like you've got to be politically ambivalent, even though left wing should be the working class party. Anyway, politics aside, it's just like, oh, they tell it as it is. They're not afraid to be a bit crude, a bit mean. Like, they've always got to be a bit slut shamey as well, and also they don't understand this newfangled gender thing. Am I right, lads?
That's a character I want to see now. You should do that character.
Oh, but just like Netflix, I think, is a serial offender of like, I swear today I saw more like stand-up specials by bald white men than I saw women. And it's all stuff like these men are like, oh, I hate being silenced, even though Netflix have paid me multi-million pounds to do a special. I'm like, who is silencing you? Or the fucking guy from the In-Betweeners who's like, oh, the joke police, even though I'm not a joke writer, have really stopped, like, they would have stopped the In-Betweeners.
Oh, he's a wanker.
We're going to have to redact that bit. But yeah.
I'm tempted to leave it in. Absolute wanker.
It's just like,
they stopped me doing my hilarious joke about when we shout wankers at strangers. I'm a comic genius. Why are they silencing me? Fuck off, you prick.
You didn't even write it, you bellend.
Yeah,
like, that's what I don't understand. It's just, they want somebody like, they still kind of want an almost modern day club comedian, I think, like that old school, but can like pass in the modern day for like working class, and it's just, it just fucks me off. Is the short answer. I can't even remember what the original question was, but we covered a lot of ground.
The original question was just, would you like a drink?
Oh shit!
Don't know how we got here.
Oh man.
Already you're one of my favourite guests, because when you turned up you presented donuts.
Yeah.
That you brought. You said you always look for a reason to buy Krispy Kreme donuts.
Yeah, so it's a weird thing I've had for ages, is that so we don't have Krispy Kreme in Cornwall, and So it was a big thing that when I moved to the city, first time 18, I was like, oh my god, they have Krispy Kremes in Tesco's? What? This is truly the land of the bourgeoisie. And then I was like, well, I'd always I coveted them like an urchin looking for a Victorian window. But I was like, they're so expensive, I can't justify that on donuts. But I swore to myself, I was like, you know what, I will buy them, but I need the right occasion. It has to be a big deal. So, I was like, maybe, when I pass this year or do exams. And every single time I forget. And I've done this now for 5 years straight, where I look into the Krispy Kreme cupboard and I'm like, one day I will buy you. And then today I was looking, because I went to Tesco's beforehand, and I was like, you know what? I've never been invited for an interview, with actual people that weren't, just my friends, although you are my friends. But I was like, this is an actual interview where someone wants to talk about my professional views. I'm gonna buy the donuts. But I bought the mini donuts. So I was like, I feel like that's a good level of being one, because they're cheaper than the rest. And I was like, they're good for sharing. Also, I did not know what flavours you guys would want. So I was like, I'll just go for the safe choice. But I felt it was an occasion to mark. I was like, you're just going to keep finding reasons to postpone it. So today was the day I bought the Krispy Kreme donuts.
If anyone from Krispy Kreme's listening and wants to send some in for Ruby,
yeah,
so she can finally have a proper Krispy Kreme donut.
Yeah, I'll at you at Twitter, if I have to. I am more than willing to be sponsored in all my future artworks to Krispy Kreme. If you want any design done, Krispy Kreme, hit me up.
I like that though, because I can sort of. There's lots of things like that when you're poor, where you're sort of, for most people, it's just yeah, we do that all the time. Yeah. But for you, it was a treat. Genuinely, I probably didn't have a Burger King till I was about 15. Oh, yeah. And I was like, God, it's posh, it's so expensive.
Ooh, it was a real treat, yeah.
No, £6 cost me.
Yeah, no, the thing, we'd only ever go to Burger King in, the early, when we first moved to Cornwall, very occasionally for birthdays, even though my dad hates Burger King. He hates Burger King, he hates Primark, because he's not willing to spend less for less ethical decisions, because he's a better man than I. But, we would beg him, until he'd eventually, he would take us occasionally on birthdays, and then it got upgraded to Pizza Express, I think. But it's still, there's still... Going for a Pizza Express meal is still quite oh, it's fancy, although it's still it's a chain. It's not that's the thing. Nice thing about my boyfriend is he's really he's introduced me to fine dining. I only got into cheese properly about 2 years ago when we first met. I just thought cheddar, that's a pretty sweet deal. I'll stick with that. Maybe maybe mozzarella if I'm feeling fancy. And then he took me to Borough Market, which I highly advise for dates, because they just give out free samples of everything. You can almost make a whole meal if you're good. So we just eat so much cheese and bread, and I was like, oh my god, cheese has different flavours. As a vegetarian, that was really mind-blowing. But I've only really discovered the concept of fancy dining the last year or two.
That's nice. That's really good.
Yeah,
I'm glad you can now enjoy cheese.
Yeah, I think the best discovery recently was that in Marks and Spencer's they do truffle mayonnaise, and so I bought that the other day because I'm terrible with money, and I was like, oh, I want to try that, and it was nice buying it as a thing. So I was like, I can splash out this extra £1 or £2 on mayonnaise, and it also having this job means I can still eat next week. In the parts at the beginning of my job where I was because I'd been unemployed for 2 months beforehand, so there was I think the first month there was about a week where I literally just had no money, so I was just living off tin soups, and now I'm buying truffle mayonnaise. This is the stuff Drake raps about. Starting from the bottom, now we're here.
I think what's interesting about what you said about your dad not liking Burger King or Primark, I feel there's a very interesting thing in society at the moment where a lot of morality and what is good, what is bad, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, is controlled by people who can afford to make those decisions.
Yeah, I was listening
people who they say you shouldn't eat here, but you shouldn't go there, but typically they're the cheapest places. And you're like, I can't afford to buy organic food. I can't afford to always buy free range lambs that were fed on wine.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is, it's always the most expensive thing that people are like, oh no, I'm better than you because I eat this. It's like, well, you can fucking afford it, mate.
Yeah. If you've got a son called like Buggy Boo Bear and you live in a fucking mansion, how dare you talk down to people about how much fucking sugar they're eating because they cannot afford what you can. It's just so like out of touch with like a lot of people. And there was another I was listening to a podcast and there was like a comedian talking about like ethical clothing and stuff, and like, they asked her like, well, what about the whole thing about people who can't afford clothes, like they can't afford expensive, and like, because that's the thing, like eco clothes are, whilst I think it'd be great and we should be getting stuff that is ethically made, but some people, they need to have clothes for their children. And they were like, well, what about people who can't afford these sort of eco clothing? And then she says like, well, people use that argument a lot, but you just have to buy less clothes. And I was like, oh yeah, mate, you fucking solved it. It's not like children fucking grow or things fall apart. Like, wow. Like that annoyed me a lot because it just felt like they didn't really answer the question. They were just like, oh, buy less stuff. It was like,
it's like going, what if people can't afford to buy 3 meals a day, and you going, well, just eat less meals a day, mate. Just eat less meals a day.
Yeah, but also I feel like that's like the sanctimonious thing about, like, I had an ex-boyfriend who once said about, because my mum is not rich at all, and then he's like, maybe your mum could save money if she didn't buy Lurpak. And I was like, who the fuck are you to deny her nice butter? It's like an extra £1 a month. It's not even, like, the annoying thing about, like, denying poor people any sense of luxury, like, they should be living on the austere minimum if they really, as if they're, like, faking being poor, if they're not, like, going for the basics of the basics. It's like, occasionally, people want a nice quality of life. I know this is hard to believe, but, just because they have very little money doesn't mean they might want to spend a little bit extra within... no, that annoys me to no end.
That was spot on, though. That's absolutely the case. There's a lot of people who have no experience of being poor, no experience of poverty, and they feel like, oh, if you're poor, it's your fault. Because, again, the media have told them.
No, it's a meritocracy.
All poor people, it's all their fault. They should have just saved more. They should just not buy butter. They should just not buy clothes for their children. They should just eat less. They should be more sensible. These stupid poor people.
These people who didn't pull themselves up by the bootstraps, even though my daddy definitely pulled me up through his, hedge funds and his fucking economic... It's just,
No, I've seen it once where there was a thing that someone shared and it was sort of breaking down, oh, I get £53 a week for my benefits, and this is how I spend it. And it was sort of like, oh, I spend £5 on the bus, I spend £6 on electricity, and like £4 on like water. It was that sort of thing, breaking it down.
Yeah.
And one of them was like, £10 of that goes on my phone and my broadband. And then someone shared it going, God, yeah, this is disgusting, how it's really hard for people. And someone below commented going, oh, well, maybe you shouldn't live with all the luxuries like a phone and broadband. And it's like, this guy is unemployed. How the fuck else are you going to get a job without a phone or broadband?
Well, that's the thing.
Just walk around going, hello, anyone got a job?
I was thinking, like, I had my phone break, I think, the end of last year. The thing was, at the time, I was waiting back for interviews. And the thing is, most companies, if they're going to interview you, they'll call you. So, like, they don't... It's really annoying. They don't email you. I have a lot of gripes about employers, to be that's for episode 2. But it's like, so much of our society is reliant on phones and internet, and people don't seem to realise.
Well, to find the jobs, you need the internet. To apply for the jobs, you need the internet. You can go in with a CV to anywhere, like Marks and Spencer, Sainsbury's, whatever, and go, here's my CV, can I hand this in? And go, oh no, you have to apply online.
Oh, God.
So that's not a luxury. That's what you need to get a job. You can't get anywhere without them.
Yeah.
Unless these people are like, oh, how dare you have the luxury of using those things at home? Why can't you just use a library when it's open 2 days a week now because they've cut all the funding for libraries?
It's just like, that's the thing, I owe so much to the library when I was growing up. Like, we didn't, we had quite a few books, we get stuff in charity shops, and like most of the stuff I wear or read is from charity shops even to this day. But I owe so much to the library because I used to read so much, and it was pretty much all from the library. All the music we used to listen to, we used to get from the library and upload to Windows Media Player, if anyone remembers it. Like, libraries are such a useful and important facet, and they are so deserving of our funding, and it's just a real shame to see how neglected they are. Like, I had another shitty ex-boyfriend who was like, oh, we should just close the libraries, and I was like, you fucking what? These people, like, they're doing something so important. They give a service that like costs you nothing, and it's brilliant. And you can every week I could go and escape to different worlds, and it like cultured my imagination in such a way. And they're so important, and they're like, oh, why can't you just use a library? It's like they're closing, they have no funding. It's just, and you also don't believe libraries should be open half the time. So
why did your dickhead ex-boyfriend feel like they should close all the libraries?
He just said it was a waste of public money. You clearly have not used a library. Like, if you don't understand like how important it is for the people who use it.
It's just that very ignorant thing. That is why a lot of cuts do go through, because the people in charge are like, well, I don't use it, so I think it's a waste of money.
Yeah, well, I have my own public library in my mansion, so why should anyone else need one? Also, because libraries, I saw a good point someone made where libraries are one of the only places in towns and cities now where you don't have to pay to be there. You don't have to, like, if you want to sit and work there in a library, you do not have to spend a single penny. Like, and that's a brilliant, because also the cost of, whilst I'd love to be a writer who can, go and write in a cafe, you have to spend money on, overpriced drinks. A lot of people don't have that privilege, and it's just, it's heartbreaking, really, I think. But yeah, people are ignorant is the short message of this.
That could be the title for the podcast, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, this is definitely the best chat I've ever had in a bowls club.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for coming on, Ruby.
It's definitely in my top 10 bowls club conversations.
And if you want to see that the whole of that top 10, I believe Ruby will be tweeting it from her We Bowling Twitter account.
Yeah, so you have to follow me, but you have to request it.
So. Genuinely, is there any accounts you want to actually push at the end?
Yeah, I have loads of stuff to sell. So, firstly, please follow me on Twitter. I'm at RubyMartinArt. I mainly do odd drawings and tweet absolute shit most of the time, but I also I'll share causes and opportunities and stuff. Also, fun thing that the BFI has just introduced, that they're going to start examining the socio-economic status of their workers and trying to employ more working class people, which I think is brilliant. Also, Danny Lee is my weird crush, but we'll just leave that there. Secondly, follow me on Twitter. I have a Redbubble shop, which you can see my shitty prints.
Can we quickly go back? Because genuinely, I feel like a lot of the experience of being working class is linked to having people punch down at you a lot of your life and having low self-esteem and low confidence because of that. So just mention the Redbubble again, but don't say they're shitty prints.
Oh, thank you.
Actually say...
Oh, that's sweet of you.
Actually say they're good.
So yeah, I have a Redbubble where I sell some of my weird drawings and prints, and They're
I think
great.
weird's the best we're going to get, isn't
Yeah.
it?
No, I mean they're just weird jokes. It's not like weird in a bad way. It's just like there's one where like the moon cusses someone out. Like it's good.
And who could ever describe that as shitty? That sounds brilliant.
Yeah. Anyway, I've got a Redbubble where I have all my fun, lovable drawings and prints, which you can find.
God, it sounds a bit weird and shitty to me.
Well, thanks for addressing the imposter syndrome in the room there, Tom. But yeah, and the most important thing, I also have a podcast called Not Safe for Writing, which is where me and my friend Emma read out smut on a somewhat fortnightly basis. We just review bad fan fiction, and it's funny. And yes, I have Comical, which is my new arts and crafts comedy night at the Star of Kings. And you can follow all of them on Twitter. It's at @comedy_comical, at NSF Writing, and at Ruby Martin Art. And you can find all my stuff on there. And I also am still very much open for commissions. If you want the moon cussing someone out, I'm more than willing to paint that in watercolour for you.
I think we'll know this podcast has been a success if there's a single commission for you to do something based on Wii bowling.
Yes. I am more than willing to do a full, I'll do a triptych Hieronymus Bosch style Wii bowling. Oh.
This has been really lovely.
Thanks for having me. It's
that's
great.
all right. Thank you very much, Ruby Martin. As Ruby said, she does have an exciting headliner who I can now reveal is the wonderful Josie Long. Yes, the actual Josie Long. How excited is that? And I also I've managed to secretly nab a spot because they had a dropout, so I feel very, very sneaky. But if you want to see a show with me and Josie Long and Ruby Martin, I mean, what more could you want? Then please do come along. You can search Comical Comedy on Facebook and you can get a ticket there. Hopefully we'll see some of you there. But for now, I'll speak to you again next week.
Yeah.